Welcome to the Wild Conversation, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Today, we get to have a wild conversation with Dr. Mark Vincent. Mark partners with accomplished leaders to pave a road through the process of business continuity and succession, slingshotting successors into the future. A process consulting pioneer and systems convener with more than 30 years of service as an executive advisor and corporate board member, Mark is a certified executive process consultant and wild facilitator. He serves on the board of MyGrow, and Mark's executive advising walks alongside a global client base. Mark established and guided Design Group International, the Society for Process Consulting, and Maestro Level Leaders. His latest book, Listening, Helping, Learning, reveals the core competencies of process consulting and how to develop help in partnership with clients. And I don't know if you caught it, but he's a certified wild facilitator and, most importantly, a dear friend of the Wild Leaders team. Mark, thank you for being with us today.
Well, I am looking forward to learning as we have this conversation, the stuff that you've been doing of late, and particularly this new report on the state of trust at work is a magnificent piece. And I can't wait for this conversation on that basis alone.
Yeah, we're excited. And before we jump in to the state of trust at work, we're going to play a quick round of wild cards. I know that you are familiar with these cards. I pulled a 10 out of our deck of 50, and I will choose a number between 1 and 10, and I'll go first and answer. And then Mark, you can choose a number, and then Rob will round us out. So I don't know what these cards say. I'll shuffle them quickly, and I'll just choose from the top, number 1. Are you needing to rise up today or be held up? Both are necessary in the course of life or even a moment. Today, I need to rise up. There are some responsibilities that I get to take part in today as a mom and as a team member. And so it's going to require me to rise to those occasions. All right, Mark.
My turn. Well, I'm going to choose number 8.
Okay. Number 8 is, if you stepped back and took a moment to pause, what would be different?
I would have planned lunch today. We talked about flow as you're getting on the camera, and when you're in flow, you forget your own name sometimes, what your other responsibilities are because you are moving things forward. And I'm realizing I have another meeting after this, and it's going to be getting into the middle of the afternoon, and I'm going to be hungry. So that's what I think. And that's not taking care of my body battery very well.
I appreciate that answer.
I do too. Yeah.
Rob.
Can I take your, I've never done this before, Sab. Can I have your question?
Yes, you can. Are you needing to rise up today or be held up? Both are necessary in the course of life or even a moment.
Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to take your question as well was because I think I'm acutely aware today of my need to be held up. And it's I've had 3 meetings this morning with team members, and I'm so struck by none of this occurs without them. You know what I mean? So I'm like, it's not like I need to be held up. It's like I just have to be. Like wild leaders can't exist. I can't even exist without that. So I learned some things about some of the things they're doing on the team that I didn't even know. And I'm like, you're amazing. So thank you, because it allows me to be my best self. So that's my answer to that question. Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much. Those questions, Mark, it is such a pleasure to have you on the Wild Conversation podcast. And I want to start off just to give people a little bit of a sense of your background and who you are. And I think I'm one of the things I wanted to ask you is, like, you cut your teeth before we get into a conversation around trust, because I know we got a lot of to talk about in that space. But you cut your teeth in the area of process consulting and systems and business continuity and things like succession planning has become a big passion of yours as well. And I think one thing that I think would be helpful for people is to understand, like, what is process consulting? I know it sounds like it could, for some of like that's a stupid question, but I hope it's not because I think it's important that we understand where we're coming from. And what is it this area where you that's the best I have is where you cut your teeth. What is that at its
Mm,
core? Why did it matter?
yeah. Well, early on in my career, I was either a meeting participant or some kind of a process participant, where I was charged with facilitating a process or facilitating regular standing meetings, but you're moving agenda through them. And I made a terrible assumption. I hate to say it, Rob. I just a big mistake on my part. I assumed that everybody was a willing, beautiful actor in the process, and they would bring their best, and we were all there to do good work, and we're just going to show up and get the work done. And so I had some really bad experiences when someone was stressed or disappointed and their anger leaked out in the middle of a meeting, or there was some kind of hidden agenda that leaked out. Well, then the temptation is to go the other direction, assume everybody's a bad actor and that they're all competing for scarce resources and meanness is the way that things work. And you got to combat that and be more powerful. And neither of those are going to be helpful in the end.
Hmm.
Humans aren't good at moving in clear, straight lines.
Hmm.
Process needs us. If we're going to build something, be able to hand it off to others, accomplish a strategy, we have to get clarity and we have to get a straight line in some form from here to there, even if it's adaptive, where we're going to experiment with something and figure out where we really need to go. And so
Yeah.
we meander, we move around. And so process consulting isn't just how do you fix a process that somehow is broken. It is a way of forming clear, straight lines from here to there with a group of people who have to figure it out and do the work. That's very different than subject matter expertise, which is often sold as consulting. And I would say that's being a vendor or a contractor. And those are great professions. But what you're doing then is saying, I know the answers. And here they are, and I'll sell them to you, or I'll sell you my time to figure it out with you. Process consulting says, I don't know the answers. You don't know the answers. Let's start developing clear, straight lines as we figure it out. So it's much more about questions and iteration of a problem than it is offering the solution.
Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. So, in the spirit of continuing to define, and thank you for that, um, because when I first got exposed to process consulting and just the whole world of process,
Mm-hmm.
that whole world and those kinds of systems, I realized like we all are formed within certain guilds, and there was a whole guild there that had linkages into my guild of industrial organizational psychology
Right.
that I don't, but they don't actually talk that often.
No, they don't.
You know what
And
I
it
mean?
started with the process is this mechanical set of steps that's been figured out, and we're trying to get them more efficient. And the human might not be an important factor in that.
It's fascinating. I was thinking, what you were making me think of too was some of the people who have made that connection are like the likes of Peter Drucker.
Yeah,
He's like someone who kind of lived with his feet in these worlds, even though he didn't actually belong to either. You know what I
right,
mean? It's like,
right.
but he could see it as he stepped back. Can I? So I had a question that I want. Also, I love, as you know, to define terms. Like, what are we actually talking about? There's another term that's in your background and it's in your current as well that I'd love for you to define because I think we throw these two words around. And I think because you just gave me a whole lot of fuel for a conversation 5 minutes from now, just now. But will you describe what business continuity is?
Yeah, yes. In its simplest form, it's being able to be in business tomorrow and next year, and
Okay.
not have to close up shop or not to be
Okay.
feeling like you're going backwards. And continuity is usually, if you allow me one more minute here, separated from succession. And in my opinion, it should not be. So what happens is when we're planning continuity, we're talking about our systems, our mechanical systems, our processing of information, financials, the facilities, the equipment, and we're saying we want to be in a spot to handle this. But when we go to succession, which is often the human part, that's over here with training and development and HR. And those two disciplines are often not talking to each other. And I would just maintain that succession is an expression of business continuity. Succession helps you have leadership in place for being in business next year also.
In the same way, would you say that process is an expression of business continuity as well?
It's a means to have it,
It's
is
a
how I
means to
would say
have
it. It's
it.
a means. It's a
Yeah.
way to do that because you're going when you look to the future and you're trying to get to an unknown solution, you're staring into the mist here. You don't have a clear line of sight. You can maybe see the next stepping stone, and then you got to stop and say, what do we have here? And the whole agile methodology that software programmers use is built on that kind of an approach, and it's been very effective for a whole lot of companies.
Yeah. Okay. This is so good. Um, so will you tell us a little bit, no, in the framing of that part, just that brief intro, tell us a little bit about what is exciting for you right now. And I want you to make sure as you do this, also tell us a little bit about maestro level leaders and why that exists
Mhm.
and why it's been important.
Well, there's a really wonderful industry that's grown up about 30 years, over the last 30 years, for peer-based advising. So people who are head of organizations can come in, close the door, know they're going to have confidentiality as they talk about an opportunity they want to chase or a problem that they want to manage better, and have people who are kind of living that life with them, and they kind of throw their lot in together and buy down the cost of a board of advisors because they all throw in some money, and you usually have a really good facilitator, an experienced, wise counsel in the middle that puts all that agenda together. But as those groups have grown and the number of offerings that are out there, one of the areas that wasn't being touched is what happens when a person is moving to what we call the third turn of executive leadership, which would be at a point where they've served long and well and grown the organization. They've done some differentiating in their marketplace. So they've got a distinctive career going and a distinctive organization, but now they're looking at the next round of strategy and they know they're not going to be in the driver's seat as that lands. And oh my God, you have it like an OMG type of a moment, like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't have a plan for my life, or I don't have a successor, or we don't have the equipment, in place to do this, and who's going to run it from here? And so to process that, they often find they're in a new isolated place, and there aren't any peers. They have differentiated themselves in their marketplace. They can't just look at another company up the street and say, how did they do it? I just want the playbook. They can look at it as examples, but they're going to have to do a great measure of figuring it out. There wasn't any, as we went into COVID, I did some research, there wasn't any offering for that kind of peer-based advising. And so we began to pull that together with a belief that other institutions out there would begin to do that. But we thought we could be first and establish some thought leadership and some hallmarks of what makes this work and what makes it effective.
Mm.
And just in January, we finished our first 4-year cohort because these are time limited journeys. And it matched pretty much with what we theorized would happen. Now, Rob, you've taught at a university. I have not. I've lectured here and there and helped with the class, but you've been in the university, pure research type of setting, and you have converted that to real world scenarios, what you're doing with Wild.
Mhm.
In my life, I can't afford to do a lot of theorizing just for the sake of exploring and saying, look, I'm published my research. I have to land on things because I'm real in that way. So I'm in the real world, and yet I want to do research. So a part of what we're doing is trying this out and seeing if what we theorized would land. And it largely did. And what we
Mm.
needed to know is if 4 years about the right time, if you have a sustained conversation about succession and continuity. And our belief was that about year 3, if you sustain it, you'll make your choice. You'll set something in motion. You'll appoint that general manager. You'll identify the key leader. You'll move up and start to
Mm.
chair the board and appoint a CEO somewhere around there. And then that means the 4th year becomes the means to live into it, to let it land and help it take its final shape. And we discovered that that was very much the case, that the intentional conversation truncates the change process a little bit, significantly reduces the drama and trauma, and does launch a successor into the future
Mm.
with very few obstacles in front of them.
It's so interesting, Mark. you know that I cut my teeth certainly in the Guild of Industrial Organizational Psychology, but also in corporate America. So
Hmm.
I didn't I was most of my experience and my network and my research over the years on leader development was in corporate context, and I didn't. And so even when Wild Leaders was beginning to scale, I didn't have anyone like you to talk to. I did not have entrepreneurial friends. I didn't even know what a founder was, quite
Right.
frankly. I
Right.
was one, and I didn't know what there was a name for it.
Hmm.
And so people that are listening right now, if you work in a corporate context, I hope this is also valuable because it's like this is such a critical part of a part of our economy,
Yes.
right? Is these small to mid cap. And when I say mid cap, I'm talking about some companies that are in the multi-billion dollar range. They're still mid cap, right? They're smaller,
Hmm.
they're mid cap businesses. And people don't think about, we talk about founders, you hear a lot about that today, about entrepreneurs and founders, and you hear about in the process and the system of their business as it exists, but we don't talk about that moment where they're going to be moving to a next phase, to that third
Right.
turn as you're describing. So I so appreciate that introduction to that. Um, One of the things, so we recently published our State of Trust at Work report, and my brain has been sucked into trust, man, for quite a while now.
Yeah, I
And
imagine.
it's been quite a journey, and as you can imagine. And so I know that you had a chance, and so I love this as a little bit of fodder for our conversation, but I know that you had a chance to read our State at Trust at Work report, and I wanted to talk about it because I haven't had a chance other than going around. I'm speaking about it everywhere and processing it with different friends, but this is a chance to do this on the podcast. Mark, in your mind, what does trust have to do with process, succession, and continuity?
Well, it's funny. I probably answering questions in a very simplistic way today. Like I really reduce it to something like this. What I'll say right now is if you're going to have a value event, trust is the currency. So the only way someone is going to say your business is worth X, I'm going to buy it, or I'm going to invest, or I'm an employee and I will join the ESOP program here now because we're going to be employee owned, any of those things. The currency is that trust and people's time and money kind of all frozen up together. And the only reason they're going to give it or invest it or whatever is they trust not just the current, they trust the possibility of the future. And one of the key things I ended up thinking about as I was reading through that report is that, yes, trust is a currency. And Rob, I've heard you say that as strongly and
Mhm.
define that as well as anyone ever. I would like to just add that currency in any form only exists because there is trust. So
Mm.
it we have to have a currency of trust, absolutely. And it's in that people will use trust and spend it as currency to make the investment, to accept some kind of an employee tenure track, or to join the 401k or anything like that, to say, I will show up for work tomorrow and give you my time for some money. That is all built on trust. And so succession and continuity is a massive event where that trust currency is put into the mix.
I think it's the interesting thing for me about trust. Something I mentioned recently was that it has prox. It's first of all, it's fair. It's something we all know is important when we stop for a moment to think about it, even if we don't actually call it trust. So I had this conversation with my son who is he's into his first full-time job now, and he's been working through that. And so and he actually, Mark, worked on our State of Trust report. So he was this amazing data analyst for us. And
Oh,
so he
great.
got deep into that report and that research. And then after he interns for us, he goes to this full-time job. And it's a very engineering kind of environment, and he's in a financial analyst role. And he was talking about different program directors who are responsible for using certain processes in the financial part of the business where they have to fill in certain forms and notify of their costs. And he said, I was learning about capital expenditures today. Or he didn't say that because he had learned about them. He said, I was doing them today. And he said, but one of the things with our processes with the program directors who are, they're engineering stuff they're dealing with is crazy. And he was saying some of them fill in, they use the systems, they fill in the forms, and some of them don't. And he said, if we don't have those forms completed, then we don't have any way to calculate overall costs for the business. And he said, one of the challenges I have is I just don't have the relationship with them yet to ask them
Yeah.
to do what I need. It's so fundamental, that connection between the system that's necessary and his statement. I don't have the relationship yet to ask them for what I need. And I think so trust is elusive, but it's also, as we say it wild all the time, it's something that we can measure.
Yes.
And and we aren't actually measuring trust. And we're measuring trust, but we're not calling it trust, because trust, you don't get trust by saying it, right? If I tell Mark to trust me, that's actually much less powerful than all the things that lead to him actually trusting me, all the
Yeah.
behaviors that would do that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as you were reading through this report, and I know you and I had a chance to just talk a little bit before this, but that there's some things that prompted some thinking in you. And I just want to open up Mark Vincent's brain. What are some of the things that struck you that are important to note that we could talk about?
Well, let's start with the fact that it was finally done, well rendered, clearly communicated, which is often hard for this kind of thing. And it seems like you've really landed in a space that's going to launch Wild's own profile and significance in years to come, because this is such an important component for any business to have continuity. So I really congratulate all of you, your whole team,
Hmm.
and working at this. And it's just going to grow in years to come, because you'll be able to show what the movement is in this currency across organizations. I'll start there, but I wanted to tell you that the most important standout thing to me, and then it prompted a question that I don't have an answer to, and it makes me deeply curious. So when we talk about 4 in 10, and these are the healthy organizations, 4 in 10 persons say, I'm in the jungle of trust. I'm in this spot where it's painful and there's danger and I don't feel safe. So if in the best companies we've got 40% of the people stuck there or feeling like they're stuck there, that's significant to know. And here's what I began to wonder: what makes for it like a jungle in a healthy company? It sounds like, maybe this like coagulates in certain departments or divisions. It's not necessarily completely widespread. It might come down to it. But I begin to think, is this, I don't know, but is this 2, 3, 4 key people who harm the trust? It feels like there's an order of magnitude that someone who is acting consciously or unconsciously in a toxic way has an order of magnitude of percentages of people that start to say this isn't safe. So I don't think it's 40 out of 100, let's say, that are saying, yeah, I'm a problem. I'm guessing 3, 4, 5 people are the keys to 40% saying I'm in the jungle.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
So one thing to just clarify some of the things you're describing is that what we found that was pretty disturbing to me when I first saw the data was that it was almost close to half were having a lived experience in the jungle. So
Yeah.
it was really close to half. And so they're living, when I say jungle, for our listeners, that means they're living in an organization where they don't really trust the systems within their organization, nor do they trust the leaders, and they also don't trust their team members.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why that was so disturbing is when I looked at the graph of this, that 2 by 2, I've been there,
Mm-hmm.
and it is such a hard place to live and sustain anything.
Yeah.
It breaks people down just one piece at a time. Now, what you also mentioned that was fascinating that we had to study was we were in a conversation debriefing the Wild Trust Index with a CEO, And you could tell sometimes CEOs will do this, not in a nefarious or weird kind of way, but they're like they're kind of wondering if they could actually pick apart who are the people who
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
more less trusting, and they kind of do it tongue in cheek. But he made this assumption that there were a few people because he was in a stronghold. So this is a high trust organization, but he was more interested in these lower ratings. Like, where is this happening? So what we looked at, Mark, was we looked at the organizations in the stronghold across our sample to see what percentage of people within those organizations are functioning within a jungle. And
Okay.
that was astonishing because it affirmed a hypothesis that I have that 40%, well, it was like 41%, I
Yeah.
believe,
Yeah.
of the people in organizations that overall are a stronghold are in the jungle.
Hmm.
And that's kind of interesting because so often I think we oversimplify things, something like trust, into something that it's built and broken. You know what I mean? It's like you've used all your trust capital and it's done, or it's not. And it's just not true. Trust is more often questioned than anything else. Like we question our trust in people all the time.
Hmm.
And I think that's really important for us to hear because it normalizes our lives. If you ask my
Yeah.
wife if she trusts me, I think she probably would say yes in a big T way, but with what?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so, but back to and this is where I'd love to continue this because you brought up something that's so critical when you think about those. So I think this is what you were getting at is in those jungles or in those strongholds, by the way,
And the strongholds too. Right.
right? Or in the islands or in the shell of trust. Um, that there are is it a few troublemakers? And that's not the words you
Yeah.
said.
No, because they could be very unconscious to it, right? It's like the currency is blowing out some holes. It's leaking somewhere, the currency of trust. And so you may have this temptation on the part of a business leader to say, I've got 100 employees. This means 40 of them don't trust. How do I figure out who the 40 are and tell them that they need to start trusting more, strengthen my relationships with them? And what I'm teasing out, what I'm thinking about is that I don't think that's the approach. I think the approach is there are somewhere in there a few people who are the leaks. They're pulling the trust out by how they're responding or not responding. And just one quick illustration from a recent conversation, a 16-person organization. They were talking about, starting with a lead a director there, and they were talking about how there's no trust, culture is terrible, people don't feel safe. It centers on one person. So in that case, 1/16. Now that's just one data point, so I don't know that that's the ratio, but 1/16 of a leak, a pull, an active engagement to cause harm to relationships, to be political, to protect, to try to control, to dominate, pulls that trust level down where you have 15 other persons who say, I don't feel safe here. I don't want to talk to you unless we can go off site. Right. So there's something like that it should point us to where are the leaks so that strongholds can get stronger and jungles become less tattered and mixed up.
Yeah. So let me dig deeper into this because it's taking me back into some of my earlier training. One of the things that is it kind of the if I had to pick a center point of our leader development efforts, it's one particular assessment in the Wild Toolkit called the Leading Under Pressure Inventory,
Mm-hmm.
which is a way for someone to assess how they show up in these high pressure moments. But more deeply, what it's actually doing is developing what's called self differentiation, or another way to frame it that's used in the trust report is emotional maturity. So what it's doing at the center of all of these developmental tools that we ended up building and we use across an organization as their system for developing people, if there was something I had to pick that is happening, it's that it is a healthy development of an individual's identity and personhood, who they are, what matters to them, and an ability to communicate those things directly at the very same time doing this paradoxical thing where they're not only developing themselves, but they're developing their capacity to see and hear others. And so it's like, and it is a paradox because it's like I developing myself is critical, but I also have to develop my capacity to see you at the same time. So I say that because if I had to pick one part, what the overall, so all the different tools I think feed that capacity. So the more someone is supported, the more they feel a sense of security and they can deepen in who they are, but they also feel they have healthier connections with others. So when we did this, and I heard Edwin Friedman, who was a family systems theorist, I heard him talking to a bunch of Microsoft managers, and he said, when he described this process of self-differentiation, he said, when this is going well, it will make every other theory of leadership look like it's a rock star.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got into this research, Mark, to your point, I think this is so important in this conversation you're opening up is that oftentimes we see, and this is the symptom, we see a problem person or certain or people as the main problem.
Right.
And what's fascinating about, and I think that there's truth to that, right? You can see you get a kind of a bad seed, and I'm not saying like a bad seed in terms of their traits, but they're developmentally not really willing to learn at this point. They're not there yet. They're backstabbing people or working around people. They just or they don't, they lack awareness. All those things are occurring. This is my fundamental theory, and it was interesting some of the results in the trust report because what we found was also that was so fascinating was that the number one driver at the personal level regarding becoming trustworthy, and also the number one driver at the organizational level, was that concept of emotional maturity, of self-differentiation.
Yeah.
And so often in organizations where you have those problems, typically it tracks back to the leader, not the problem.
Right.
Does that like I was like
Yeah.
usually that symptom of a problem person who's allowed to fester
Mm-hmm.
is not they're not actually the problem.
Right.
It's a lack of strong leadership, strong and connected leadership.
Right.
Tell me what you hear in that.
Well, because you brought up the wild assessments and specifically that leading under pressure one, I want to tell you, I've never had a chance to tell you this, Rob, but I really experienced the wild assessments as a form of examine. So, there's this Jesuit tradition of looking back and seeing what gave shape to the day and where you performed well and what you might want to do with that. The difference is, or the addition that you've done, is that you've said toward what end, and it's the development of the person. So there's a very specific thing that this person is identifying the assessments invite them to begin to articulate where they want to go, what they see as whole in comparison to what you've been able to hold up as whole. And so now you're doing this exercise of reflecting and articulating toward a direction that fosters a self differentiation while also helping a person build an appreciation for the work that other people have to do and to stop treating people as things and objects so that you can grow and so that you can perform so forth. So that's what I hear you saying. I'm just playing it back in some of my own words, but bringing the wild assessments back in. That's I think one of the hallmarks of what you've created. And if a person is going to grow a trust currency in their organization, they're going to have to know who they are and be able to hear who other people are on the way to what they want to be. That requires something more than just technical skill. It requires the ability to be very soft with people, even while you get more accurate, direct, and firm on process.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was our, if you had a fundamental definition of that, it was that it was a person's capacity to be direct and truthful.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, so at the very same time, to stay connected.
Right.
And it like it always takes work to do that.
Yeah.
Um, it was interesting. The other part that you just lit up in my circuitry here is one of our findings was looking at the organizations in the stronghold and also those in the jungle and trying to understand how does personal leader or individual contributor development impact those spaces. So to the extent, like we were just saying, if you are developing, increasing that capacity of a person to know who they are, which by the way, the cool thing about business from my perspective, Mark, is that we actually, to some extent, people kind of go into a job expecting they're going to have to learn something. Like I think we actually it's more common there than it is in marriage, for example. Like you know what I mean? You know you're going to have to get better at your job. And so what's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating is that basic leader development stuff, like understanding my competencies, actually increases that sense of self,
Yes.
which is that deepens from our research, it increases that trustworthiness. But what we found, and there was other thing in there where like I think it was like 76% um, of people who are operating in strongholds, 76% of those employees are actually doing pretty well on the personal development side. So they're learning and growing and becoming better versions of themselves. Um, One of the things I want to ask you about related, leading back to the earlier part of our conversation, is this connection between process, business continuity, um, and the people side and the trust side. Because one of the things that we also that I think is so often is overlooked when it comes to trust is the necessity for process.
Mm-hmm.
Will you say something about that, Mark? I just to connect those dots. Like, how in the world does process and systems relate to our capacity to trust each other?
To develop a means from here to there means we have to slow down. We have to stop. We have to put a set of steps together. When we are paying attention where we are and where we want to go, we have to have stopped to ask ourselves that question in the first place. Where am I? Who am I? What do I have to work with? Where do I want to take this? That requires reflection, doesn't require high performance, rushing around, being frantic. You have to stop and let the executive part of your brain kick in, not
Mm,
just the reactionary part of your brain, not the trained part of your brain. So you stop, you slow down, you begin to do that. Well, now to do a process in an organization, you're actually asking the organization to stop, slow down, and reflect on what matters
hmm,
and what will get you from here to there. And this is why we have this maxim go slow to go fast. You stop, you slow down. You don't just do it for everything, but you're doing it based upon what you want to cultivate, where you want to go. And that means you're actually asking, in case of the leaders, to be the executive function or the executive brain of the organization. It's
hmm,
Marshall Goldsmith, I think, who said, you're
yeah,
paid to think, right?
hmm,
You're a brain athlete. This is what you do. You've got to get to that higher order function of the brain in order to do this. So this is where that reflective, slow it down in order then to know you've got a line of sight and you can take off. That's the centerpiece of process
yeah,
when it comes to continuity, strategy, performance, and so on. The way I would wrap this up is I think that fundamentally comes down to the leadership of self. In order to be able to have a good first turn, those earlier years in the career, you have to know how to lead yourself. And the challenges and the context that come on us all life long mean we never conquer that. We're never completely done learning to lead
hmm,
ourselves. And it's very frequent that a maestro level leader will tell me, I'm having to use muscles of restraint that I never developed in my life. I've been a hard charger, making things happen. And now I have to actually restrict myself, or nobody else is going to be able to take this on. And I have to be able to bless them when I would have said, I've got it before. And so they're having to work to do this. And I would like to just say it this way: if we do not do this continuous growth of leading ourselves, then we're going to end up doing something that is going to deplete all of the trust and that entire currency we spent our lifetime building. There's a reason why we call organizations houses of cards. No matter how large they become, no matter how much good they've done, and at its heart, at the very center of that, are those leaders who are knowing and cultivating and reflecting on how to lead themselves to be appropriate at the right time and in the right way.
Well said. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mark.
Incredible. Mark, thank you. We want our listeners and viewers to know how to find you. What is the best place for them to connect with you and Maestro Level Leaders?
Well, I was fortunate enough recently to be able to get my name with a .com after it. So it just makes it really easy. Mark, use the middle initial L, marklvincent.com.
Perfect. And one last wild question, Mark. Are you in a season of accepting yourself or changing yourself?
Yes. I accept what I am by God's grace, and I am profoundly aware of the growth that's in front of me. So they're together.
Beautiful.
Beautifully
Yeah.
said. Thank you so much, Mark.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this Wild Conversation podcast. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.